The diner clock ticked past midnight, its faint echo lost beneath the sizzling of the grill and the low hum of a jukebox that had long outlived its glory days. Rain lashed against the windows like restless ghosts, and the neon sign outside flickered weakly, casting a red glow over the cracked linoleum floor. Behind the counter stood a young waitress named Emily Carter, her pale hands trembling slightly as she poured coffee for a group of bikers who had stopped by to escape the storm. Her eyes, though tired, carried something deeper: fear, that kind of fear that sits heavy in the chest and never quite goes away. She kept glancing toward the window, every small sound making her flinch. Because outside, just beyond the fogged glass, a shadow waited, a man watching her. If you believe that kindness still exists in this world, that people deserve second chances, and that goodness can rise from even the darkest hearts, then pause for a moment, like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel, Silent Stories, and tell us in the comments below, where are you watching from tonight? Because this story might just restore your faith in humanity. Emily had been working at that old roadside diner for nearly 2 years. Life hadn't been kind to her. She came from a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, and where her broken past followed her like a shadow she could never outrun. Her mother had left when she was 16, her father drank himself into silence, and by 19, she had learned the art of surviving alone. Her job barely covered rent for a rundown studio apartment above a garage, but it gave her peace. Or at least it used to, until he started showing up. The man's name was Jason Miller, a local mechanic who had once asked her out. She had politely declined, smiling through her discomfort. But his interest didn't end there. He began waiting for her outside after her shifts, following her to the bus stop, sending flowers she never asked for. And when she ignored him, the gifts turned into threats. Anonymous notes under her door. The sound of footsteps in the hallway when she came home. Her friends told her to call the police, but she had tried once, only to be told they couldn't do much unless something actually happened. That night, as the storm raged on, Emily felt that familiar prickle down her spine again. Jason was there outside in the rain, standing across the road under a flickering streetlight. She tried to steady her breath to focus on work, but the panic kept building in her chest. Then her eyes met someone else's, a man sitting alone at the far end of the counter. Big, broad-shouldered, his black leather jacket worn from years on the road. The patch on his back was unmistakable Hell's Angels. His name was Mark Dalton, a man whose reputation rode ahead of him like thunder before a storm. To most he looked like danger, but that night to Emily he looked like safety. When she brought him his coffee, her voice cracked. Barely audible, she whispered, "He won't stop following me." The words were almost lost under the diner's noise, but Mark heard them. He looked up slowly, his eyes dark but calm. Without saying a word, he turned his head toward the window and saw the man standing outside. Something changed in his expression. Not anger, but quiet, deliberate resolve. He sipped his coffee, set the cup down gently, and told her in a low voice, "Go to the back. Stay there." Minutes later, the bell over the diner door jingled. Jason walked in, dripping wet, his smirk twisting as he scanned the place. But Mark was already standing between him and the counter. The biker's presence filled the room. Tall, unmoving, silent as stone. Jason tried to brush past him, mumbling something about just talking to her, but Mark didn't move. His voice was steady, almost calm. "Not tonight. Not ever again." What happened next wasn't loud. There were no punches, no shouting, just a quiet tension that seemed to freeze the air. Jason looked into Mark's eyes, and something inside him faltered. Maybe it was the realization that this man didn't need to threaten him to make him afraid. The weight of Mark's stare alone was enough. After a long moment, Jason turned and left, slamming the door behind him. Rain swallowed his retreat. Emily watched from the kitchen door, tears she didn't even notice streaming down her face. When she stepped out, Mark was sitting again, his coffee cold but untouched. She tried to speak, but words failed her. He simply nodded and said, "You're safe now." Then he placed a few bills on the counter, far more than the coffee cost, and walked out into the storm. The roar of his motorcycle soon faded into the night. But that wasn't the end of it. The next morning, Emily found a note slipped under the diner door. It wasn't from Jason, it was from Mark. Written in rough handwriting were the words, "If he ever comes near you again, tell them the angels are watching." She didn't know what to feel, fear, gratitude, or disbelief. But over the next few days, Jason vanished. He stopped showing up, stopped calling, stopped existing in her world, and word around town was that he'd sold his car and left in a hurry. No one knew where he went. Life slowly returned to normal. Emily began smiling again, laughing again. She worked her shifts, saved a little money, and even started taking evening classes at the community college. Yet, sometimes late at night, she would hear the faint sound of motorcycles in the distance and look out her window, half expecting to see that same black jacket parked under the streetlight, keeping watch. Months later, a convoy of Hell's Angels rolled into town for a charity ride, raising money for a local children's hospital. Emily was working that morning when she saw them pull up outside the diner. Among them was Mark, his presence unchanged, his gaze steady. When their eyes met, she smiled for the first time without fear. He nodded in return, no words needed, because between them stood an unspoken truth. Sometimes the ones the world fears most are the ones who protect it when no one else will. That night, after closing the diner, Emily stood outside and looked up at the stars. She whispered a quiet thank you to the darkness, knowing that somewhere out there, a group of men the world judged harshly were riding through the night, not as outlaws, but as guardians of the forgotten. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that strength can come wrapped in leather and kindness can wear a scarred face, then please like, comment, and share this video. Help this story reach someone who might need to believe that there are still good people out there. And before this story ends, tell us in the comments, do you believe that even the toughest hearts can hold compassion? Because sometimes the angels we pray for ride motorcycles,